One question you may have is when to use Ridge and when to use lasso regression. First, let's look at the computational complexity. How fast is to run each one of these models? Ridge regression has a closed form solution. That means there's a formula that gives me the beta values that minimizes the Ridge loss function. Lasso does not have a conventional analytical solution, as the L1 norm has no derivative at 0, and therefore is slower to compute than Ridge regression. The other thing we need to examine is how the coefficient magnitudes change as a function of the regularization parameter lambda. As we increase the regularization parameter, the coefficients become smaller and smaller in a continuous fashion. That's why sometimes regularization is called shrinkage method. In the case of a lasso regression, we notice that as the regularization parameter increases, some of the coefficients become 0. To understand this, let's look at them next to each other. On the left we have the lasso, and on the right we have the Ridge. Red contours represent the equal values of the MSE term, and the blue line, or blue circle, will represent equal values of the regularization term. The lasso regularization term, since it's the addition of the absolute values, will give me rhombus shapes. Where the Ridge regression, since we're adding the square of the coefficients, will give me circles. The actual minimum will happen when those two meet. We can see in the lasso that this will happen at the edges of the rhombus. On the Ridge, it will happen anywhere on the circle. But also notice that at those corners, one of the coefficients will be 0. For example, where the lasso estimator is shown in the figure, beta 1 will be 0, and the other 4 corners will have one of the two 0. Where in the Ridge regression, the coefficients will reduce, but none of them will become 0. And that brings us to the conclusion that since lasso regression tends to produce 0 estimates for a number of model parameters, we consider lasso to be a variable selection method. Ridge, on the other hand, is faster to compute, but many of us prefer lasso for variable selection and therefore easier to interpret.